Hi, my name's Amelia.
And I'm Justin.
And this is Raising Barbarians, a podcast about being human. And we're going to talk today about boredom.
Welcome to the first podcast, and this might be part of a series of doing hard things. It's a podcast about living natural.
Yeah. And so, as far as doing hard thing goes, when we talk about boredom, a lot of people find boredom to be a big struggle. They've been writing about it for a long time, but one of the biggest examples people use for people hating boredom is this experiment they did where people were asked to sit in a room and do nothing for however long it was, but if they felt, if they wanted to, there was a button in front of them to shock them. And after not a very long time, could have looked into it, but after a while, everybody would choose to shock themselves rather than sit there and be bored. Would you shock yourself?
I have.
Just recently for fun? With a dog collar?
Yeah, they had the dog collar and we held it and we all tried getting shocked with it.
Going up one notch at a time, starting at like number 5 or something and going up to number 10.
And just in case you don't know, we're pro people having opportunities to be what people will call boredom. I don't like calling it boredom, but that's a good way to describe it is boredom. But I think it makes sense that if that's not a usual situation of what you would call boredom, I would just call it not being entertained.
Sure. So
being stuck in a room, not doing anything is a little different.
This is why I think that the way that it's framed as people being terrified of boredom is not a very good framework, because in fact all that you're seeing there is an opportunity you're sitting there, you're doing nothing, and then there's something interesting in front of you. When we were shocking ourselves, kids included, we had a lot going on. We had friends over, we were all having a good time, we were talking, climbing, and that was something that we decided to do because the kids were interested, and then we were like, well, yeah, I guess I'll try it too, and it didn't grow out of boredom, it grew out of interest. And actually, once you have something of interest to you, it's wrong to say that there's anything related to boredom going on.
Yes, I don't think, if my choice was between like some kind of torturous thing and boredom, I wouldn't want to be tortured, but shock isn't torturous, it's something interesting, I guess. It doesn't injure you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to injure myself out of boredom.
No.
So what did that study make you think about when you heard it?
Well, generally speaking, anytime you hear about the study, it's to show that people use it particularly in reference to today when we're talking about smartphone use, like as though the only reason anybody would ever do that is because they can't stand a few moments of downtime where they're not being entertained or doing something, so they would rather shock themselves than do it. And I think that is a false framework about what it is.
I agree. Because it just makes sense that if you were doing this only one thing you're allowed to do, there's a good chance you're going to do it.
Yeah.
If it's not, if you're put in a room alone with a gun, you're not going to blow your head off if you understand that the gun. But if you're put alone in a room with like static shock or something, you might go, okay, I'll get static shock.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that you might do for fun that are quite uncomfortable just because they're interesting. When you have a breath holding contest, right? Holding your breath is very painful and scary and really triggers your fight or flight response. It's kind of terrifying when you're holding your breath for as long as you possibly can underwater, but that is something that people regularly do as a form of entertainment. Or we compete with doing dead hangs, and that calluses your hands and it burns when you're hanging for a minute plus. Your hands are just beet red and throbbing when you get down. That's not something we're doing out of boredom. see if I can put him down. But he's not quite. I was thinking that today before we started. I'm like, this isn't his best possible time to do this. This past like couple of weeks. We could try this. He's asleep, but I don't know how well that would work either.
What does he need now? To be walked around or something? Does he need to be entertained?
He needs comfort.
It's comfort, yeah. You could stand up and walk him a bit if you want while we do the podcast.
Sure.
You just have to get stay close to the mic.
I was considering just putting him in the carrier and walking the whole time.
Yeah.
So anywho, boredom. So then the question of whether or not something qualifies, are you bored just because you decide to do something that's not nothing? And I think the answer to that is no. I don't think just wanting to do something means that you're bored or trapped in a fear of boredom or anything like that. And then the other thing would be,
there's more stimulating things and less stimulating. Like going to a concert with the light show and the loud music, that's very stimulating. But today I was picking up pine cones and buying pine cones in the park. And you could call that boring.
mm-hmm.
Was I being bored? I wasn't bored. I was picking up pine cones. Someone might say this is boring. We're picking up pine cones, but it's not being in a concert with a loud light, like a light show and loud music and stuff like that. But it gives you time to think while you pick up pine cones. If we're talking about having time to think and be a person, going back to natural living, it allows you time with yourself, picking up pine cones as opposed to playing a video game. One gives you more time to think about things than the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
One's more movement, body work too.
Yeah, that's like active downtime, and men in particular, they say thrive very well for decision making and processes emotions, doing it physically, because they don't tend to be as word oriented. So actually doing something physical or where you're still goal oriented is an important way to process.
There was a satisfaction to seeing the pine cone pile grow bigger and bigger and finding them. So it was kind of like a game, but it wasn't a video game, and it wasn't an anime or a movie or a screen.
Yeah. So this taps into, like, pine cone collecting taps very well into, I was gonna say, what is the evolutionary purpose of the feeling of boredom in humans? And not that this is something that we can know, but let's say that the primary purpose of boredom, the current going theory, is in order to induce you to do something other than you're doing, because what you're doing at the time is low return. So the example that they're giving in most papers is you're sitting there and you're picking berries, but as you pick most of the berries off the bush and there's fewer and fewer berries, there's fewer triggers of interest and excitement. So now you're getting diminishing marginal returns, so you would move on to the next bush or the next task you have to accomplish. So rather than boredom being this very negative thing, it is something that induces action in us. He did not have a full meeting before we started. We'll probably just try to start over.
So we had a brief intermission, take care of the babies, be a little happier.
Yeah. So we were talking about diminishing marginal returns for why we have boredom. So I think that you'd said earlier in the podcast about we're for people being bored, even though we don't like that framework. Is that the wording you used?
Well, we're pro having opportunities to. I don't call it boredom, but we're for like having moments to yourself where you're not being entertained or doing something like with people or most for like screens, music, TV, like all that kind of stuff.
Sure, that you don't always have to be plugged in, but you also don't have to be part of like the productivity bro or whatever, where you have to wake up at 5 a.m. and start immediately on always doing something and getting something done that's already been planned out. You don't have to either be exercising or meditating or doing an ice bath or catching up on the news or getting your social time in. It's of value to you as a human to have time that is just sitting or whatever, like we talked about.
You can't just taking a walk without any music.
Yeah, taking a walk without
outside.
music. And there is upsides to, I think that there's value in both, having that sort of unmediated downtime with 2 people or 3 people, whatever it is, and then also trying to make sure that you have some by yourself, because you get different ideas when you're by yourself and you think in a different way, but having that unmediated downtime with another person also allows you to bounce ideas off of each other. But you have to have something to say in order to come into a conversation and gain anything from the other person, right? Or you have to at least have a question you want answered.
Was there other things on your notes?
Oh, there's lots of things. But when we were talking about that, my point is, so the downtime that you need is where creativity comes from. If you don't have downtime, you don't have creativity. If you have constant inputs. And I was trying to think of a good metaphor for why it is that you don't get creative thoughts when you're constantly plugged in, turned on, and busy.
So you get good ideas when you're not always listening to a podcast at every waking moment.
The meme about it is basically shower thoughts, right? You tend to think more original things when you're just sitting there in the shower because you're not necessarily busy with anything in the shower or trying to accomplish anything.
I'm usually trying to brush my hair.
Get your hair.
Take a shower.
Get your hair taken care of. Yes, I'm not. Well, at this point I am.
You do just go be in the shower.
I don't think I have most of my creative thoughts in the shower though. I mostly just sit there and feel comfortable.
Where do you have your creative thoughts?
I take walks every day. Only some of the time sometimes I listen to music or a podcast or a book, but sometimes I go without it. I think I do a lot of reading, and usually after I'm done reading, I try to, or in the middle of reading, I stop and try to digest what it is that I'm reading so I can have some time to connect those ideas to the other ideas that I have. And that's important to do to be able to. So obviously reading is an input, but if you can take pauses between, then you can see how, where'd you put it?
Yeah, for myself, I do actually feel like I get ideas when I'm watching something or listening to like a podcast or a song or reading. While I'm reading, I feel like I'm getting ideas as I read. Obviously, I am getting ideas when I read. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. It's not my own idea. And I'm not usually coming up with my own ideas, I guess, when I'm listening to a podcast. I'm hearing other people. I have my thoughts about the ideas.
Yeah, depends on how you frame, yeah.
And you could consider it a big thought to hear something like, hey, do this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go do that. But
so there's a difference between, right, like the point about shower thoughts is that they are sort of, they feel untethered from things. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? Which is a different kind of thought process and a different kind of creativity that's involved in just responding to something. Right, and so the point, there are people who in their life try to avoid having any inputs at all, right? So in up until 1990, there were these kinds of monks called anchorites. These kinds of monks called anchorites, who, and then the Japanese had something similar too. But what they would do is they lived in these caves and they would go and plaster over the entire cave outside of a small window, and they would like give them food and water through there. And obviously you would just have like desert hermits and stuff like that. So some people think, but those people are trying to hear the voice of God, not so much trying to be creative.
yeah, I remember those babies. Suppose I don't know if this really happened, but there was this one guy who kept these babies from hearing anyone talk, and then they died.
Yeah.
Something about God's voice or something like that.
Oh, they thought that we would, is that was his,
They would speak God's language if they didn't get corrupted by our worldly language or something like that. I don't know if it's true. It's a story I remember hearing. I don't have the. You guys can look it up and post about it in the comments.
So there's the people who do things like that and they shut themselves out to anything, but being in favor of alone time, boredom, downtime, however you want to put that, being in favor of that does not mean that you think that everybody should have no inputs, right?
Yeah, no, I am in favor of definitely having times where you're to yourself. I think it's important to do that and not always have a TV on or things like that. And I can't put it exactly into words. I'm not like citing studies here, but I always thought that's important. And I know that for our kids, bringing back creativity, that our kids have very good concentration. Our kids can entertain themselves, so they're not
For hours.
they're not in a point where they need to be entertained, and that's the thing people feel they have to do with their kids, and it's tiring to feel you have to be a jester for your children. We don't do that for our children, so and that's not a good situation to be in as an adult either, where you have to just be entertained to be able to entertain yourself, being able to have concentration. If you have no concentration and you constantly be entertained, then you're more like the zombie where you're just being told the story.
Again, I would say that what it creates,
you're being controlled, I guess.
it creates a very disjointed, unintegrated, and very unintegrated self, because what you have is a variety of inputs that you have no time to integrate with any core aspects of yourself if you're just constantly being entertained and having things put into you. With the boys, you know, the reason they're able to, yes, I think being creative and
Imagination, going back to boredom, creativity, they have good imagination.
yes, and so kids, there's this test that I wanted to talk about. It's not the Turing test. That's what I wanted to say that, but it's close. The Torrance test. And so this guy realized that there were certain kids that got in trouble all the time at school, and basically they're the daydreamers, and those kids who were the daydreaming type had creativity.
I was a big daydreamer.
Yeah.
I got in trouble sometimes.
I was not a big daydreamer. I did what I was told. But they showed an immense amount of creativity, and they said creativity was 3 times better at predicting later life success than was IQ. Now, I don't know that that's true, and also I think that it would be...
I think creativity is a kind of intelligence. I thought it was measured by IQ, it may not, but you know, it's problem solving.
IQ is going to be creative problem solving, sure, but not only. There's so the Torrance test was giving somebody a toy and being like, what are all the different ways you can use this toy, and how would you improve on it? And that's what they would ask the kids to do. So there's both problem solving and creativity involved in that test. So it's a little bit hard to say, because the person who's going to score highest on that test is already going to score relatively high on IQ because they are problem solvers. So that's what I was going to say. I think that these two things, the two concepts, are a little bit too intertwined. What does an intelligence without creativity look like? Would be how you would have to frame that. So, but the boys are given some screen time, yes, but they're given very limited screen time. We have 4 boys, and they also are not read to all the time. They're not played with, and they actually don't really have that many toys. Usually there's only...
We have a Swedish ladder, a mat, blocks, you know, there's no video games, no electronic toys, no loud noise toys, mostly no light stuff. Sometimes they had these lightsaber things, but
Oh, that's true. They did have the lightsabers. The reason they ended up with
Those
that
are a
toy.
little out of what we usually get them.
Well, they chose that for each other for Christmas. They get a couple of dollars to choose toys for each other, and they chose those.
But our kids have great concentration, great imaginations when compared to what you would expect them to have. Even people in our circles who follow a lot of the things we do. I think we do it maybe a little more, and obviously each person is going to be different. Some people just really have good concentration, while others might not. And it depends. Different things hold people's attention. Our boys might be more into books, for example, than other people. But yeah, they have good concentration. I think a big part of that is not being overstimulated. The diet too, of boring food.
Yeah.
People, we didn't talk about, this is our first time interface on this, but some people, they don't have the palate to enjoy complex food. They just need loud food, like super salty, super sweet, super strong, like specific types of flavors that they've become used to. Loud colors, the bright red, if our son eats that red stuff, they say it makes you crazy. Well,
we have one son who responds
probably poorly to junk food,
quite poorly to junk food and sugar. The other ones can manage it sometimes. That one is just a hard no all the time.
But yeah, junk food, this not boring food, this exciting food, often also hijacks you. We talked about. I mentioned this guy who I listen to on YouTube sometimes. I think he's called Dr. Berg, who he mentioned dopamine hits from like pornography, or even he called it soft pornography, even just going on like Facebook and seeing stuff on there. All these dopamine hits you get from the reels or whatever, and the cure to that being boredom. Boredom is the cure to all these dopamine hits, and why he was talking about is if people feel like they can't do anything. So being bored helps stop your addiction, or stop. I'm gonna call it compulsion. Stop your your drive, your want to constantly be entertained or look at these things, and then if you're bored, you can actually do things again. You actually can take action.
So in the case of getting, that's like dopamine burnout from using your phone or from eating certain kinds of foods. What happens is just like with any other like addictive subject, your tolerance gets higher and higher, and in the case of serotonin and dopamine, things like that, eventually your brain cannot create any more dopamine. You don't have the nutrients in your body in order to continue to create dopamine for everything. So it needs higher and higher. Things need to register higher and higher in order to get the same boost of go get that you would normally get. Dopamine is not like necessarily the pleasure chemical like how it's often advertised. It's a motivation chemical. It is a signifier that a reward is coming if you continue your behavior. And if you are giving yourself very high inputs, you're only going to be able to get that motivation up for things with those super high rewards and high returns, or that feel that way when they really aren't that way. Like in the case of pornography, your brain can convince itself that you're getting the evolutionary drive for sex is a real drive, but watching porn isn't actually satisfying that drive, but it can feel like it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I would just say that there's, I learned this word dopamine, but yes, you can form habits, bad habits. You are who you hang out with. Have good habits. It's a good habit. It's a bad habit to overstimulate yourself with food and entertainment, and even the real thing would be a bad habit.
Well, like if on the other side, if you didn't want to talk about pornography in that way, then we would say for men and women, with women having a stronger drive towards like having likes, right? Like, but men have this
women really enjoy attention, especially
men
online.
Men really enjoy having likes as well. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
Both are going to have that.
Yeah, sure. Attention to a man can lead to money and all the other things a man wants in this current world.
Men like to be validated for the effort that they're putting into things, right? So both sexes. But likes on Facebook is not actually the approval of your community, but your brain can't necessarily tell the difference.
Sure, we don't really have communities anymore, at least the way we,
Anybody in the past has ever known it.
yeah, it's hard, so talking about having kids and all that. That's another reason why people are on screens, is because it used to be people had community and they felt comfortable sending their kid out into a multi-age neighborhood, a street where they knew the people who would be driving down the street, and
They knew that everybody
people
was
were
watching
parents. But now you don't know who's in your neighborhood. There's just people driving down your street. You have no idea who they are. There's not kids outside playing, so the kids are kept inside and put on a screen. And now if you do, like us, want to put your kid outside, it can be nerve-wracking because maybe society doesn't want that, and they might say you're being bad by putting your kid outside to play outside and not just be standing right there with them.
We've been very lucky in our, we live in a very small neighborhood on a 1-block road, and so our kids have always played out front.
Yeah, we're not on a major road, and we can see right out front, and there's other kids who are allowed to play outside on this area, so there's other kids outside, which is nice, and it's not as good as it could be. It's not like but then we've got some community, unlike some people might have no community and feel really uncomfortable letting their kids even play outside.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in, but it doesn't have to be that way.
As far as it goes with connecting dopamine and community, and the reason people are on phones is because they don't have people around them to be connecting with. I think there's a lot of spurs to go off to that, but one of the things that reminded me of is the rat experiment with the cocaine.
Yeah, I don't know there's a book titled Bowling Alone. People are going online because they don't have a meeting town hall or a meeting place where they all just gather together in person, so they go online and hit like and look at entertainment things that turn into like a TikTok situation, where you talked about how your memory got really bad when you were not on TikTok, but Facebook put reels on Facebook, and the scrolling activity is constantly getting that dopamine hit of like, oh, the woman holding a baby, oh, the food's getting made really fast. Look, the food's just coming together.
It looks like good soup.
Oh, the soup just happened. It took your memory away a little bit.
Yeah,
I think.
it
It was like getting drunk a lot or something.
Yeah. So
Stole your time.
The Bowling Alone, the experiment that they did with the mice is, they put the mice alone in a cage with a button that could disperse cocaine to them, and they would cocaine themselves to death. But then if they put a bunch of mice together in a big community and they gave them a cocaine button, they would rarely, if ever, use it. They didn't need the constant input of cocaine when they just had mice people friends around to connect with. So that would, I guess, be another good tip for how to, I was going to say not use cocaine, not use your phone too much, would be to generally just be spending time around people and connecting with people that you actually like to be around. And that is one of the reasons too that the boys do pretty well without having much in the way of toys or entertainment, is because we do have somebody on our street and we have friends that we bring them to play with that they're able to.
And they can entertain themselves because of that, because no one sits with the kids. There's not like we're bringing our kids to an activity where them and their friends and adults leading the activity. They have to make their own games, or they can play by themselves completely, or they can play with other kids where they're all, no one's like the entertainer. The kids are all playing together, and that's a good thing, and they don't all have to just watch screens and play video games together, because that's probably what a lot of kids do together now. Is I've seen it, they all get together and they all pull out their screens while they're together.
We just recently
and
had a
start
kid
playing
come
games.
over that wasn't from our general friend group, and he came over and asked for the Wi-Fi password, and I had to tell him, like, oh, we don't want you on your phone while you're here. That was the first time, because Our oldest is only 7. I haven't actually run into that yet, but that boy is 10. And I guess his parents thought it was an appropriate time for him to have a phone.
Yeah, we don't plan to get our kid I didn't get a phone, obviously I'm from a different age. I didn't get a phone until I bought one myself as an adult.
And I didn't get a phone till I was 13 years old.
That's better than giving it to as a kid, and we don't plan to give them a phone or an iPad or a screen. They get to use ours sometimes, and we have a projector that, to make things a little harder, when we want to watch a movie or something like that, we try to use a projector, and we don't have a TV, so we'll bring a projector out when we want to watch something on the big
really
screen.
limits us to movie night for the most part. It's a little bit hard to use a projector in the daytime. I mean, you could get blackout curtains.
Or a more
We don't do
powerful
that.
projector.
Or a more powerful projector. There are ways you could make the thing that you've got for it to be hard to use easier to use, but
Night's probably not the best time to watch a movie either, but in some ways it is.
well, it's different when you're on the projector because it's not shining the blue light directly into your eye.
I don't even know if the blue light thing's true. I think some people have said just light isn't good unless it's like a fire light, like a
Well,
flame.
it's amber light. It's
Um,
amber light, and the big thing is it can't be any lights overhead are problematic, regardless of color. But that doesn't mean any lights from down here are problematic, regardless of color. So blue light is a problem no matter the height that it's at, but all lights are a problem over your head, because this is sunlight.
Yeah,
This
if you can't be
would be
bored
fire light.
too, that means at night you can't just be quiet and go to sleep. You'll have to have maybe a screen on, and that's going to make it harder to go to sleep if you're trying to fall asleep as you watch a screen. People do it all the time, but it's harder. Most people probably have not the greatest sleep,
Yeah, no.
but if you can be bored, you can turn the screen off and sit with yourself and fall asleep.
And the C.S. Lewis quote was, you ended up talking about the guy you watched on YouTube, but because C.S. Lewis's quote was basically like, this is not a good paraphrasing at all, but try not to have high sensory input because then it will become impossible to enjoy anything, versus if you train yourself to always deal with low sensory input, you will be happy with all of the things around you, right? Like, if you watch, I don't know, if you watch The Matrix all day long, then
Matrix, that's the
The
one.
Matrix all day.
Yeah, like I'm in the Matrix, watching the Matrix.
Then watching birds flip from tree to tree will not be super interesting to you. Versus if you flip it, if you're usually watching birds flip, the Matrix, when you choose to do it, will be very interesting. So one of those should be your baseline, and one of them most definitely should not. And he said that if you continue down the path of eating Doritos and watching The Matrix all day, word for word quote here from C.S. Lewis,
Doritos.
Doritos and The Matrix, then life will become empty and meaningless.
Doritos in Narnia. Talking Doritos.
Okay.
Chester Cheeto eating his Doritos.
I don't think that's right. Okay. All right. So I think that's the end of our show. Do we sign off then?
You can say peace.
Bye.